Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me so well or don't know me at all, my name is Alex Beebe, as Raymond said. In addition to, so I just want to introduce a little bit more about myself, about my involvement here in the community. So I've been a Sunday school teacher here for the 4th and 5th grades for the past 2 years. You may know my father. He's given here sermons several times, and Dr. Beebe, and also my sister Katya has been the MC for several church services in the past. And I'm also blessed to Heidi Hokinson, who moved to New Jersey this year to live with my family and I. And I currently work at Hobby World Marine. This is my first sermon, as Raymond said, and I would like to thank him for giving me this opportunity and for helping me refine my final message. And also Uncle Joe for helping me get started and to filter my initial ideas. Okay. So I wanted to start off sharing a little bit about some personal experience. So growing up, upon reflection, kind of looking back, I think at some point I had subconsciously decided that, within our church, our teachings of love and selflessness were all really great and admirable, but in fact, I felt that they were unrealistic and unachievable in practice. And I think this assumption was, this belief partially came from my own observation that I couldn't really find unconditional love within myself, even for my own friends and my family. When asked, of course, I think I would fairly easily offer my trust, but I think upon reflection, I could really see that I never really initiated friendships, and I also often expected to be disappointed by everyone's imperfection. So that I had a number of experiences in my life, I think, that helped me change this thinking and change my concepts here. The first, I want to talk about 2 of these experiences. The first experience was a retreat organized by Jin Kwon Hyung. And this retreat was really designed to help participants recognize and overcome internal obstacles. And I think at this retreat I was able to, for the first time, discover a kind of love for my older siblings that I never knew that I had. I think the reason I hadn't been able to recognize this was because these feelings were obstructed by other feelings of estrangement that I had from them. But when I could recognize this love that had really been gone unexpressed for a long time, I felt a burden could lift off of my heart. Part of the retreat was that we were supposed to write a letter to the people that were involved in our with these internal obstacles of ours. And so upon writing these letters, so that was a success in and of itself to kind of put it down. But then I could take the next step and actually send these letters to my siblings. And I think through this experience, the first step, I could recognize that I myself was capable of selfless love. Thank you. Another experience that furthered this kind of, that helped to further develop my concept in this area was catalyzed actually by my college roommate. He liked to ask really deep questions of my friends and I. And so this one was, you know, what in our lives were we most proud of? So this is a question that I'd of course thought of before, but usually it's in the context. I think the automatic thinking tends to be, and before I'd only ever really thought of this, I think in terms of my own accomplishments. But I think this time, for whatever reason, I identified a truer answer. So I felt at this point really a pride in I found pride in my I found pride in my little brother for his unconditional love and the way, at the time, I mean, this was in the form of, I felt boundless respect and admiration. But this was a level of love for his older sibling that I felt I was never able to express for my own older siblings. So of course, I hadn't really asked for this love, and I didn't even feel that I deserved it, right? But this made me realize that it's not me, but my brother that was the origin of love, and that my worthiness was irrelevant. Sorry. So I think I've been able to come a long way since then. I've had other experiences as well, and now in my married life, I feel that I can give and identify selfless love on a regular basis. And if there's anything that I can attribute this level of success to, is through these experiences that I could learn that it is possible and not pointless for people to try and to succeed at putting others at the center of their actions. So through these examples and the rest of my sermon, I hope to illustrate that the importance of the combination of truth and love, and an attitude of love at least, to achieve understanding between people. So life can be thought of as a collection of experiences, I believe, and throughout our lives, we tend to we develop concepts about how the world works in order to help us shape and direct the creation of those experiences. History has seen the development of many such concepts, particularly aimed at uniting the world under one banner. So I have a couple of examples here, and one is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think he's a common example, and he preached nonviolence to win over his oppressors, to friendship and understanding. And he's credited with many of the successes of the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s in the US. And this practice, this message stemmed from his concept that all people were created equal, and that one day they would be treated as such. Another example of a historical figure is Lenin and his successors. They also had a vision of uniting the world, but theirs was one of uniting it under the fist of the working class. So Lenin's concept here was that all the problems of the people stemmed from the upper class, and that the only way to fix the situation was through force. So communism was a dream of government-enforced equality, whereas King dreamt of equality that was freely shared between people. So the difference in their methodologies clearly reflects a difference in the concepts they held. So from the divine principle, we know that as the creator of the universe and its laws, God is reflected in the laws of the universe. And so I would like to take this time to explore what science, the study of God's creation, can teach us about understanding other people and their concepts. So relativity is a fairly complex concept in science, but basically, well, I won't get into it in detail, but the first time students learn about relativity, it often leaves them confused and scratching their heads. And this is because it's a theory that really requires the individual to think outside of themselves. So relativity teaches us that many of the basic principles that we've grown up to accept as absolute truths, it teaches us that these, in fact, don't apply anywhere but in our own perspective. One big example is Newton's laws of motion. And these help us understand and predict what will happen when we throw a baseball, right? But two people can see the same baseball following Newton's laws, but also taking two different paths. So this teaches us that we cannot use Newton's laws to predict what other people see. So if we extend this line of reasoning to internal truth, we can consider, so what are some areas in which we tend to create personal truths out of our own experiences? These include things like what we believe is fashionable, or what we think someone's race says about a person, or what the roles of rewards and punishment are. In the story that I shared in the beginning, my personal truth was that true love was unrealistic, right? So if you consider the situation where I am a tutor, and that I tutor your child, so you being the parent, and also consider that I believe rewards rewards when given only spoil children, only spoil kids, whereas you believe that rewards serve to encourage them to continue pursuing a path. So if you never see me rewarding your child for his hard work, you might think that I do not see any potential in your child, when in fact I might just be trying to keep him working hard. This means that you cannot use your concepts about rewards to understand what I think about your child, about your child's potential. So that was just an example. But more generally speaking, the differences in people's perspectives results in a dilemma of trying to identify and trying to determine what perspective is right, whose perspective is correct. And this has led modern-day culture to adopt, many people in modern-day culture to adopt some form of moral relativism. And in fact, many people see this as the obvious extension of relativity. Because if you think about it, how could anyone be right if everyone's perspective is inherently different? They can't be the same. Anyway. However, I think that this is an incomplete view of relativity. After all, relativity is the theory that the individual can use to predict what another person sees. People can find God's perspective if they can see that they themselves are not the origin of truth. The question is then, what is the absolute internal truth, analogous to relativity in science, that can bridge people's perspectives? So, since religion is the teaching of internal truths, we should take a look there probably and see what religion has to say about this. And in fact, I think in this idea of personal perspective being inherently limited, scientific truth reflects religious teaching. Jesus taught, love your neighbor as yourself. True parents teach, live for the sake of others, and also even God cannot love without having partners to love. Or God cannot feel love without partners to love. So these teachings all emphasize that you need to leave the personal perspective where the self is the center and instead put others at the center. True love and sacrifice always accompany each other because the individual is necessarily at the mercy of the other's ability to self-sacrifice and give love. So all the individual can really do is invest their energy and love in another person and hope for the best. There's no guarantee that they'll get anything in return. So the fact that the other is the owner of love, I think, is the core truth at the center of unity and understanding of others. So in the story that I shared with you about in my life, my brother was the other person. And more generally, the other is anyone and everyone that you interact with. So if we look back, if we look back at Martin Luther King and Lenin and see how we can apply what we just learned, I think you can see that Dr. King's teachings were destined to bring about unity, whereas those of Lenin were not. And the reason is that one reflected this core truth about unity and the other did not. So King was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of restoring his enemies, while Lenin, he instituted a system. He couldn't even trust his own compatriots to treat each other with fairness. He instituted a system that that inherently lacked trust for its subjects, and it would take the choice of loving and sharing out of the hands of the people. He essentially, the framework of communism would take away the framework within which people could even come to understand each other in the first place. And the result is that you have a society full of selfish people. that cannot unite. So in conclusion, I want to take a step back and see what we learned about truth and love. So we know that from the DP that the Messiah came to us both with God's love and God's truth. So I think in our modern day culture, and the emphasis is a lot on love, and you might think, you might pose the question, isn't love enough? Isn't it enough just to focus on loving other people? So I think what we learned here is that truth and love are incomplete without each other. Without love, we know that truth is blind and it can lead people astray. It doesn't have direction. But without truth, love is lame and it can't achieve the result that you want. So the purpose of religious, ideological, and even scientific truth, as taught by Father, is actually to bring a world in which, to help us bring about a world in which we can live in love. And so there's a symbiotic relationship there that allows love to take place in the first place. Yeah, thank you.